Best Soccer Show, Jason Davis, joined now on the line by former international goalkeeper, MLS great Tony Meola. How are you, Tony?
I'm great, thanks, Jason. How are you?
I'm good. I know you're in Seattle. I know you've got a program through Allstate. Why don't you talk a little bit about that and what's going on there?
Yeah, so Allstate's in its third year of sponsorship with Major League Soccer and the U.S. National teams. And I've been lucky enough for the 3 years to be with Allstate and as their spokesperson. And essentially what we do is we go around to bigger events, Major League Soccer's All-Star games, the finals, U.S. national team qualifiers, games like that. And we try and embed ourselves for a couple days into the community with different clinics, special events, and, then I'll spend some time prior to the game. Today, the Seattle-Portland MLS Rivalry Week game, in the fan zone before the game, meet some fans, and then go enjoy what I think will be a great soccer game.
Absolutely. Obviously, the atmosphere there in Seattle is amazing. Now, let me start with this. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask Tony Meola about the state of American goalkeeping at this moment. Tim Howard injured. Brad Guzan steps in. Do you foresee any major changes? What does the United States lose with Tim Howard out?
Well, I don't think we're in any crisis at all. Obviously, Tim Howard has been the guy. He's been the man we've expected to see in the goal for the U.S. team for the last 10 years or so. I think it's really important to understand that Brad Guzan is ready, in my opinion. He's waited for his chance. He's played very well at his club team, Aston Villa, in the English Premier League. And I think it will be at the end of the day, it'll be something that we don't necessarily see a drop off in that position. If we miss one thing, that will be the fact that Tim has been a leader with the U.S. national team for so long, and not that Brad Guzan cannot be a leader. There's no question about that. It's just it'll be a different voice. I kind of look at it, though, as there potentially could be a situation where you have sort of a rallying cry around a guy that I think the entire team respects, understands the position he's in. Unfortunately, in the goalkeeping position, there's only one guy that gets the opportunity to play. Mm-hmm. But again, I don't think that's going to be an issue for the U.S. team in these upcoming qualifiers.
Well, obviously, the part of the nerves on the part of U.S. national team fans is the fact that it's a young defensive, or at least a young pair of center backs, most likely. And what happened in Honduras doesn't fill everybody with a lot of confidence against Costa Rica and Mexico. So how does Brad Guzan not only have to step in for Tim Howard, but he's got to communicate well with two guys he's probably never played with before? How does that situation work for a goalkeeper thrust into that position?
Well, that would be more of a concern is the back four for me. Now, how does he communicate any different than maybe Tim Howard did or had to with a new back four in the first game? Tim had never really played with that core guys together, so it's the same thing. And I think from a defensive standpoint, you expect your goalkeepers to offer some help from behind, some communication from behind. But at the end of the day, those four guys got to be organized enough in front of the goalkeeper to get the job done. I agree with you. It wasn't great against Honduras. I think we got into a situation where we ball watched a little bit and didn't recognize the danger quickly enough. So that's what hurt. That wasn't a matter of communication. It was a matter of organization and alertness. Which quite honestly that responsibility doesn't and shouldn't fall on the goalkeeper. So again, I don't think the goalkeeping position would be my concern. It would be, as you said, more the back four.
Well, it's obviously a difficult time to go through a transition with your back four, starting the Hex and trying to qualify for Brazil. We all knew this was going to happen eventually, that a changing of the guard was coming along. But when it comes at a time when there's some doubts around the team and Jurgen Klinsmann's program, maybe not everybody's buying into that. How do you see the state of the program? Are we as fans more nervous than we have a right to be?
No, as fans, you can certainly be as nervous as you want to be. I, as a fan, am a little bit nervous. I do think that we will qualify in the end. I don't think it's going to be as easy as people have thought. I've said this all along. The schedule is not very favorable. In a lot of different regards. In the past, we were able to bring, Costa Rica and Mexico into places that were a little bit colder, given the time of the schedule. There aren't very many places in America that are going to be too cold, just like they want to bring us down in the heat and the altitude and places like that. So a lot of things didn't match up, and that's why I said when the draw came out a few months ago, I thought the Honduras game, the first game, was one we had to win. It was one that we had to go and get 3 points in, because I, quite honestly, didn't think Honduras was a great team. I didn't think it's not a team that I would have thought that we would have gone on and not beaten. Now, I understand anything happens in soccer games, and especially on the road, and bad calls can go your way, but I didn't see it that way. I just saw a team that flat out beat us and deserved to get 3 points. I also think that will be corrected.
You talked about the deficit of leadership with Tim Howard out, and Brad Guzan can obviously step in and be something of a leader in the back. But part of this is, and maybe we focus too much on Landon Donovan because he's been a fixture for so long. And I know he's not necessarily the most vocal leader on the field, but where does that leadership come from? You don't have Donovan, who's been the fixture. You've got a set of younger guys like Michael Bradley is a leader in some way, but how is that part of what happened in Honduras? There was just not one guy to kind of take the team by the scruff of the neck and lead them to the victory.
Yeah, when you talk about leadership on the field, and you mentioned the Honduras game, or potentially bringing Landon Donovan into the system, and I just think people lead in different ways. I look at Michael Bradley. He leads in a way that's different than Tim Howard, that's different than Clint Dempsey, or if you had Landon Donovan, and somebody at the end of the day has to step up for your team and organize and show some grit and all of that stuff. And all of those guys do it in different ways. The one guy that I thought needed to be on the field in that particular game was Carlos Bocanegra. Now he's not playing all that much at his club team right now, but he's been a fixture in the back and a calming influence, and a guy that seems to find a way to make plays all the time. And I understand that the guard is changing a little bit with the national team, but in that particular game, I had him picked as a starter in that lineup just because I thought his leadership qualities, given the circumstances, given the importance of the game, the need to come out with some points, we would have seen him on the field. So, not very easy decisions for Jurgen Klinsmann, but when you talk about the program and people buying into it, at the end of the day, I've said all along, I look at one thing, and that's does Jurgen Klinsmann get us to the World Cup? And right now, I can understand why fans have questions.
Obviously, it's a tough situation. Steve Cherundolo is hurt. Carlos Bocanegra's not playing. Landon Donovan's on sabbatical, and that's a lot of changes at one time. Do you believe, and just to spin off of your point about Jurgen Klinsmann getting the United States to the World Cup, do you believe that he has the wherewithal, the understanding of what CONCACAF is about? I mean, we make a big deal out of that, but is there some truth to it that Klinsmann just doesn't know how to navigate this very well?
Well, there is truth to how difficult CONCACAF is, and I don't think people around the world really know. And I think Jurgen Klinsmann and his staff, the first time around, and admittedly by them, didn't have a clear picture of what CONCACAF was and how to navigate through it. And I think going through it one time has given them the experience to say, hey, these are the conditions we're going to be in. The fields are not going to be perfect. The calls are not going to go our way. The fans, obviously, it's not going to be great. The travel's not going to be great. The hotels and the accommodations, are going to be different than we're used to. And we've got to deal with all of these things. We've got to make it right at the end of the day. And it is quite different than other places, around the world. And it's something that you certainly learn through experience, but unfortunately, in this case, there's not a lot of time to learn. You've got to get into it, and you've got to get the job done.
Let me ask you about something that just dropped yesterday. Apparently, in an upcoming ESPN The Magazine interview, Bruce Arena said players in the national team should be American. If they're born in other countries, we aren't making progress. Now, there's obviously some questions surrounding that. I mean, Bruce benefited from a couple of guys not born in this country. But do you agree with anything that sentiment, what that statement says about the progress the United States is making as a soccer country, that we should have guys that were born and raised here on our national team?
Yeah, I mean, there's some validity to what Bruce says, and I think it probably comes from the fact that it seems as if from the outside we're searching for German Americans. Mm-hmm. That's what I've heard from people, even just walking on the street, that are soccer fans that I've spoken to. I still think that, of course, we've had guys like Thomas Dooley, Ernie Stewart, Roy Wegerle, that have come into the program, and I'm sure I'm missing a couple off the top of my head, but that have come into the program and have done well for us. But I don't know that we went out and searched for every one of those guys and tried to find them. The majority of our guys are always going to be from, born and raised in the U.S. and have gone through either a college system or now the academy system and that type of thing. And but I mean, it's tricky. Every coach has their own idea on how to play and what type of player you want. And Jurgen Klinsmann's going to do it different than Bruce Arena, who's going to do it different than Bob Bradley, and so on. So it's a matter of preference, and if Bruce feels that way, Bruce is a very smart guy, and although he's not the coach of the national team, I know follows it very closely.
Let's move into MLS. Obviously, the season is underway. This weekend is Rivalry Weekend. You and I are talking before the games start on Saturday. But as a guy that started in this, that was in this league when it started, that's seen these rivalries kind of grow up, and some of them are newer. And you're in Seattle, you'll see firsthand Seattle and Portland. But talk about the New York DC rivalry a little bit. How did that? I mean, I think some people might not understand how intense that is. How did that start?
Yeah, the Portland-Seattle rivalry is the oldest one in soccer.
Right.
But the New York, and that one started in I believe the mid-'70s with the NASL and all of that stuff.
Right.
Excuse me. The New York DC rivalry started on day one of Major League Soccer in 1996, and I host a show with John Harkes every day on Sirius XM FC, and we joke about how quickly there was hatred built between the two teams. For a group of guys that had known each other and respected each other and appreciated what you could do on the field and all that stuff, how quickly we grew to hate each other as an organization, as organizations, as players. And it was funny, we joked just yesterday on the show where John and I would actually curse each other out on the field, on a corner kick, and if there was a little scuffle or something, and we'd go at it, and then after the game, we'd go out and have a nice dinner together. It was just there's just something from the start of that rivalry, unlike what you see in Dallas and Houston, that's growing over the years, and Colorado and Real Salt Lake, which has grown into a nice little special rivalry, and of course Seattle Portland, which has been for 40 years now, has been a lot of bitterness and hatred between two groups. But I think all in all, everybody respects each other at the end of the day, and it makes for a fun atmosphere in the stadium.
Well, let me ask you, from a player's perspective, I mean, how much of, I mean, you were there for the start of DC and New York, and that grew started on the field for the most part, and transferred over to an organizational thing in the fans. But if you're a player and you come into a situation where your new club has a rival, how much different is playing in those games than a normal game if you don't really have that kind of context of experiencing it before.
Yeah, no question. It's a great point. When you come into a team, and they were talking about the Yedlin kid yesterday for Seattle, who's going to walk into this rivalry and start it right back. Both John and I asked Chris Henderson, the technical director who we had on, how do you convince a kid that all of a sudden he needs to have this hatred for someone he's never had hatred before for, and it's not a matter of disrespect. It's a matter of having pride in the jersey that you're wearing, having pride in what your teammates mean to you and what they've gone through, and understanding. And the other thing is, once you get on the field and you feel the sort of the extra intensity, I think you pick it up right away. And that's what athletes do. I mean, they understand the moment, they understand the importance of the moment, and all of that stuff, and they kind of adapt to it right away. But it is a great question you're asking. You're asking kids or players that never had any ill feelings towards somebody, all of a sudden to develop this hatred for not only one person but this entire organization that they had no connection to in the past. But they quickly learn. Believe me, they quickly learn.
Obviously, rivalry is a big part of selling this league. Something a little bit. I mean, there's rivalries in other sports that soccer's trying to make theirs, and we've got some fantastic ones. Now, I've got to ask about you spent some great years in Kansas City. You won a title in Kansas City. Does anything that's happening in Kansas City surprise you? Are you shocked by the stadium and the enthusiasm that's surrounding that team?
Well, I am shocked, given how it was when I was there, and we had great support when I was there. We just played in this massive stadium that just seemed sometimes empty. Even on the nights where we were able to draw, a couple nights we drew almost 30,000 people, and they seemed to almost have a difficult time expressing their feelings in the stadium that held 80,000 people. So, when you looked at it, the stadium almost looked bare, but now they've got this unbelievable stadium, this unbelievable attraction to the team. The rebranding was something that everybody was concerned about initially in Kansas City, going from the Wizards to Sporting KC. But Rob Heineman and his group, along with Peter Vermes, my good friend and head coach there, have engulfed themselves in the community, and it just goes to show that you can make a turnaround if you do it right. Are you jealous of MLS players now? They get to play in these beautiful soccer-specific stadiums in front of packed houses? No, I'm happy for them. I've got nothing to be jealous about, that's for sure. I would have loved to have played in Kansas City, and but I was at the start of a lot of really good things. It would it be fun to play today in Seattle, Portland, New York, DC, those rivalries again? Yeah, it would be fun, but I enjoy it as a fan now. I enjoy it as a guy who sits back and says, hey, I was a small part of the growth of the game in this country. I'm happy for the players. I'm happy that the work that guys in my era did now continues to grow. I just hope that the guys in this era understand that they still need to grow it. We're not at the end. We're still someplace, and we're not in the beginning. We're still someplace in the middle, and hopefully they take as much pride in growing the game as the guys in my generation took in growing the game.
Well, you played your part as a player in growing the game in this country, and now, as you mentioned, you're doing radio with John Harkes on Sirius XM. From a meta standpoint in terms of soccer media and how we're covering soccer in this country, I mean, obviously EPL gets a lot of attention, and ESPN and NBC now have bought in. How do you view the growth of how America kind of looks at soccer? We're still not on regular sports talk radio that much. So you and I, I'm doing a podcast, you're doing a radio show on satellite. How do you view that growth? Has it come a long way, and where can it go?
Well, it certainly has come a long way, and it still is the one area where I think it needs to grow. Viewership for our games needs to grow, but I will say this, that just today as we speak, and this weekend, I read that there are 80 games on TV this weekend. Mm-hmm. Somewhere on your cable network and on your on NBC and ESPN that are covering Major League Soccer, there are 80 games you have the opportunity to watch. That doesn't happen anywhere in the world. Some people will argue that it's oversaturated, that it's we put too many games on and we promote so many other leagues. But heck, we're a melting pot in the U.S. and to see the growth for me is exciting because growing up it was hard for me to watch soccer games. Mm-hmm. It was hard for me to see anything outside the World Cup and maybe a game on Saturday morning in England. And John and I do the show, and to think that the two of us would have had a show that's a national show on a 24-hour day soccer network. If you'd have told us that 15, 20 years ago, I'd have told you were crazy. Mm-hmm. But that's where we've come. Does it again have somewhere to go? Absolutely. We cover it. John and I cover it in a little bit different way and a little bit different angle than most people do. But at the end of the day, we're still covering the game that we love.
Right. It's the stuff surrounding all of that television, all of those televised games, that I think is the room for most growth, and that's what you and John are doing, and obviously the rest of us as well. Tony Meola from Seattle. Enjoy your time in Seattle. Enjoy that rivalry, Tony. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Hey, thanks so much, and I look forward to chatting again.